Welcome to The Window on Your World TV Network. My name is Ifalade Tashia Asante. I want to wish you a happy MLK Day. Today we're celebrating across the world the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, civil rights hero, and his work in creating a peaceful coexistence in the United States of America. I'm your host of The Window tonight, and we have some exciting topics that we're going to be talking about. I'm actually going to be joined for the first time in history, in Your World TV history, by Hadia Malaika as my guest tonight. And we're going to toss around some subjects that you, our viewers, have let us know are important to you. So we're excited, and if you'll join me in welcoming our guest for this evening, Hadia Malaika.
Hi.
Welcome. Welcome to the show.
It's good to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I have some hot, steaming hot, and pretty controversial topics tonight. I thought it only fitting tonight that we would talk about the civil rights movement. And what I subtitled it is that it's a very different battle. I've been doing quite a bit of thinking about just what the civil rights movement is about at this time and day in this country, what it represents, the work that we're doing, and if we're effective, if the tactics, the strategy that we're using to fight for civil rights in this country is still an effective strategy. So some of the things that I, of course, played with was the Occupy Wall Street movement, some of the other strategies that we're seeing activists employing, and what I feel, Hadia, is that the kind of the old way, the marches and the rallies and the picket signs, I kind of feel like it's almost outdated, like it's an archaic strategy. It's proved its ineffectiveness, to really address the issues in this country. Now, I do like many things about the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Occupy LA and all the other occupations that are taking place across the world. I think that the intentions are good, and I certainly see the value and the selflessness in marching and picketing and protests and that kind of thing. But what I miss a lot of times is the agenda, a well thought out agenda with objectives that are realistic and reachable. And I want to see, I think when I think about, marching or walking or, doing that type of work, it's like I want to be clear on what we're going to accomplish by this. When I put this sign down, is it going to really mean something? Is it really going to mean social change in this country? Is it really going to facilitate a shift in terms of social justice?
I think that's a very interesting topic. You brought a lot of things into it. One, picking up the sign and putting it down and having something actually occur, having a specific agenda for the marches or the sit-ins or the Occupy. But I think it's a new day, it's a new world, and the people that are participating in Occupy Wall Street and the other Occupy movements realize that it's not just picking up the sign and then having something happen, because, that's a finite thing. What they're really trying to affect is change. And the change they're talking about is the way that we are dealt with as American citizens by corporations. So that's a change that doesn't have a specific finite task or a finite objective that must be met. It's an overall sweeping change. So from their point of view, and I think I understand it, and I also understand that it's going to be very difficult to achieve. That they have to not give a specific thing that can be granted while everything else continues unabated.
Sure.
They have to do a overall generality and say, as a corporation, you have a responsibility to the citizens of the United States to treat us fairly, to give us jobs, to not outsource our jobs, to not take our tax dollars to finance your outsourcing of our jobs.
Yes.
So it's an overall perspective change, I believe, that they're trying to accomplish.
Yes, and I did go online and research some of the agenda that they've set for themselves, and I think they've been purposely, as someone said earlier, purposely a bit vague in terms of what they're presenting. They talked about banking reform. They certainly talked about the corporate responsibility. And I understand in July of this year, there's also going to be some sort of gathering where they plan to present their agenda to a large audience and have an audience participation, a very democratic setup in terms of how they're going to present their agenda and their goals, the goals of the Occupy movement. But one thing I'll say is I think that they underestimated, once again, the tactics of the resistance, the people who are resisting the work of, the occupation. And I think that's something that activists and people who are involved in political work, grassroots political work in this country, have to think about. They have to, have a bit more understanding of how the legal system works in this country. Because, there's been like a blatant, almost violent resistance to the Occupy movement in the United States and abroad. And, people have been harmed and jailed. And I don't think, because it's a peaceful movement, I think they never anticipated that, the government would go there, the powers that be, the legal system, the law enforcement would go there with them. So I think there's another piece around really understanding the opponent to American freedom.
And there is a very strong opponent to American freedom. When you talk about MLK Day and civil rights boil down to the basic human rights of the civilians, civil rights. And that's the same thing that's going on today. We have a right to have our retirement still be there after we save our entire lives. We have a right to be able to live in our country and produce the goods that we're buying. We have a right to expect the CEOs to not reward themselves for failure. We have a right to believe that the banking institutions that we put our money into won't squander that money. So as far as the resistance is concerned, when you look at civil rights throughout history, during Martin Luther King's time, there was always an organized movement against civil rights. Yes. So, it's overcoming that. And I think that perhaps you're right. Maybe they did not expect this resistance. But in a way, I think they did expect this resistance, and that's the reason why they call themselves a leaderless movement, so no one could be specifically targeted. Yes. So, that was a strategy for dealing with what they knew was going to be the onslaught against it, I believe.
And that was incredibly brilliant, and not to mention original and unique, because typically the civil rights movement would identify a leader, someone that, people could target to go after. And so there were pluses and minuses to them. Of course, the minus being, we lost some amazing people in the movement, both in prison and death, assassination. So I think that it was a very smart and strategic movement of the occupation strategy. And but I think that too, the use of technology, and they have done some phenomenal things. I understand from very close friends who have been a part of the Occupy Wall Street movement. A friend of mine, Zaum, who's done work in that movement, she herself talked about how amazingly organized the movement was. And those were the things that impressed me, that, they didn't just walk out and, occupy a courtyard or whatever without a way to feed themselves and clothe themselves and clean themselves. So, and the support, oh my God, the celebrity support that we saw across the board, and the local grassroots support in the different cities and countries where the Occupy movement took place. I was extremely impressed by that. And I think that our local grassroots activists could, learn a lot from it. But I just have to believe that, we have to kind of upgrade our activism, because I think that there's only so much we can do with a picket sign. While that is a powerful and noble gesture, and it's certainly a selfless gesture, but I think that when we're fighting wars of technology, when people have, a $1 billion campaign to support their agenda, and we're coming at them with a picket sign, it's pretty ineffective. But I definitely feel that the heart is in it, in the right place. The intentions are honorable and good, and but I think we have to fight a lot smarter if we're going to be effective.
You're probably right. But saying that, I'll also say that they have sown the seeds. And the seeds for people that feel more needs to be done, invigorate those people.
Yes.
You know, and in doing the sowing of the seeds, they haven't put themselves in harm's way. There's no one that's been assassinated. There's no one they can point out. And when you talk about the grassroots support, as that grows, those people are involved. And they're involved because they believe in the things that are wrong that these people are bringing out. These things are wrong. Something needs to change. A lot of people say they need a specific agenda. I think if they had a specific agenda, it would hurt them as a movement. They are not, in my opinion, the movement that is going to effect the change. They are the movement that caused the beginning of the change.
Spearhead. Yeah, that's a great thing. Well, you're watching The Window with myself, host, and we're very fortunate tonight to have a member of the Your World TV network team with us. We decided to team up tonight and talk to you about the issues that you've emailed us and posted on our website. Tell us that are important to you. And if you're online, you can check us out at yourworldtv.ning.com. You can also see us at JustinTV/YourWorldTVN. That's Texas, Vera, Nancy. Your World TVN on TV, Justin TV. So please do tune in and tell a bunch of people to come out and watch us. And we have another phenomenal topic. As most of you know, we are on the edge of the beginning of the campaign work toward the election of our next president. And President Barack Obama has clearly stated his intentions to run again for president. And we've identified a leading candidate on the Republican side, who is, I believe, what is the candidate on the Republican side?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney, someone said earlier, named after the baseball mitt. I'm just kidding, I don't mean that. But I thought it would be interesting tonight to talk about just the re-election of President Obama. There's been so much dialogue in the community, particularly the African American community, about President Obama's performance the last 4 years of his presidency, and kind of what we expected, what we got, and what we hope for if he is reelected. We haven't seen a strong front runner in the Democratic Party. So, you know, President Obama is pretty much it in terms of a realistic candidate. And it looks like Mitt Romney is going to be the leader on the Republican side. And I know one of the arguments that I've heard, Hadia, is that, you know, on the African American front, is that people say, you know, they signed up, like myself and many others, to support President Obama because he represented specific ideals. But I think that some people may have had some unrealistic expectations of President Obama. I think, you know, I want to emphasize, I always say when I get into these discussions, that he's not the president of Black America. He's the president of America. He's not the president of Latino America or Asian America. He's the president of America. So I think it's unrealistic and inappropriate to expect him to, you know, to do things just to support the Black agenda. Now, it's an important agenda, and I certainly think as an African American man that he ought to be interested in the, you know, the challenges and the problems and the key issues facing the Black community. But as the president of the United States, I don't feel it's realistic or appropriate to expect him to fix, you know, Black social issues, you know, as a priority. And then there's other pieces. And now clearly, before I close, in my final statements, I want to say, you know, I, as a, you know, President Obama supporter, someone who got out there and worked on his campaign, who supported his election, you know, have been very concerned, particularly about, you know, some of the things involving, you know, his support of the Patriot Act and other legislation that has ripped away the things in the United States Constitution that protect us as American citizens. I mean, I was shocked and appalled, as they say, you know, and, you know, I mean, as someone who, you know, has sung this man's, you know, praises. And I'm not someone who voted for President Obama just because he was an African American man. You know, I went and did the research. I wanted to know what his values were, what his platform was, and what he stood for. And I was, you know, very impressed and felt like, you know, it was really what America needed at the time. Now I'm not so sure. And we want to know what you think. If you're watching us live on Justin TV, you can chime in the chat room. You can email us at YourWorldTV Network 1 at AOL.com. We'd love to hear from you. And Hadia Malaiko, what are your thoughts on the re-election of President Obama, as well as what we expected for the last 4 years, what we got, and what we hope for if he is re-elected?
You know, this is a very interesting topic because I hear a lot in the community as well, where a lot of people have said to me that they feel that he let down the black people, or he did not do very much for the black people. I think that from my point of view, it's more he did do a lot of things for specific groups of people. When you look at it, he tried to put in universal health care, and even though parts of it are being repealed, the fact that he wanted to ensure that as people are in the greatest recession that we've been in my lifetime, they still were able to take their children and their wives and their husbands to the hospital if something happened and not be turned away. I think that you know, a lot of the general hospitals are closing that used to take Medicare and that type thing, and without some protection of this type, you know, a lot of people would not have any coverage whatsoever. But it's been interesting to me that a lot of the grassroots opposition to this has come from the working people.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the unemployed working people, but it's the working people. And personally, I feel I am not opposed to paying $3 or $4 more out of my paycheck every week to ensure that my neighbor that's been laid off can take his children to the hospital. I am not, that's not a problem for me. So a lot of people feel, why should we pay for them? Well, it's only a step or two until you are them. You know, so just from that point of view, I think that he really pushed that hard. He worked on it, and he tried to get it passed. He repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is backwards. I mean, the Canadian military has had same-gender loving homosexuals in their military serving freely and openly for, you know, I don't know, 50 years or something like that, so some amount of time. I mean, and they say it's no problem whatsoever. You know, as a civilized and a progressive first world country, we have to get past a lot of the provincial thinking that we, you know, came out with. So he did that.
That was huge.
Yeah, and it wasn't for one particular group, black or white, Latino. It was for, you know, everyone. Yes. But on the other hand, you know, he has really disappointed me with signing that act with the Japanese that allowed them to continue slaughtering whales. I mean, this is an environmental issue that we all understand, and it's time for that to end. There is no reason to kill whales in this day and time. There are many other sources of oil and blood and fat, and, you know, for your lamps or whatever. You do not have to kill mammals. You know, we understand that these are thinking creatures. So when he signed that accord, I just could not believe it. Yeah. And then as he, you know, we're continuing to deal with the repercussions of the oil spills in the Gulf Coast. And then he is, I guess, preparing to sign another bill to allow that pipeline to go forward. You know, we don't want it. You know, we don't want that fracking, you know, where we're forcing water into the earth to cause oil, the oil to come to the surface, and it even caused earthquakes. I mean, we're damaging the earth we're living in, and we need him to take a stand. We need him to stand up. That's why we elected him. Yes. And as far as for specifically the black community, I think it's time for people to look overall and say, you know, each community has specific items that need to be addressed. But it's not necessarily for that black community, Latino community, or any other community like that. It's for these American citizens have this particular thing that needs to be addressed. You know, I'm more for a right to work kind of situation. You know, I understand, you know, he's not supporting a lot of the, you know, pork barrel, you know, kind of things, but that's fine from my point of view. But he's let me down because the stripping away of the American rights that began in the Bush administration, he has not stood firm against. I thought it would be a reversal. Instead, I'm seeing the expansion of the stripping of American citizens' rights. You know, when they can come into your home and say, we're going to detain you because we think you're a terrorist, what defines that? That's too arbitrary.
And you have no right to an attorney or
Yeah.
to a trial
Or,
even.
yeah, and
They
you're
can
an
hold
American
you.
citizen.
Yeah.
That is unconstitutional any way you look at it.
outrageous.
And the fact that he would even sign that, I mean, for any reason, even if he was overruled and has stood against it, I could appreciate it. But for him to sign that, he has disappointed me more than I can express.
Yes, and I know that, you know, there was also talk that it excluded Americans, but I understand the people who kind of dissected the legislation, it shows that it does not, in fact, exclude Americans.
Well, there's a portion near the beginning that says does not include American citizens, but then when you get near the end, it says by his discretion.
Yes.
So depending on who's in power, if the wrong person gets to be president, it could be very discretionary.
And it gives
so
military jurisdiction over those arrests. I mean, so we're
right,
in effect,
a military state,
right.
a dictatorship. I mean, we could be going.
Scary.
Yeah, it's
A lot of people aren't even aware that this legislation took place and that this is no longer a right that we have.
Right.
And including the Privacy Act, where they can come in now and, you know, tap your phone. They don't have to tell you that you're being investigated or anything. A lot of people aren't even aware that these rights have been stripped away from us. And it started, as you said, in the Bush administration. And we, you know, really hoped, I really hoped that President Obama would, you know, repeal some of those things, those, you know, insane things that were put in place by the former administration. But it just has not happened. And so, you know, we're hoping that, you know, President Obama, if you're watching Your World TV, that you will see how important the United States Constitution and all it represents to American citizens, that you will do the work that you promised you would do and keep it in place, you know, protect our people, protect our rights, you know, as citizens of this country, and maintain the principles that America was founded upon.
Yes, and the last thing I want to say is the most important thing to me in the next upcoming election is our liberty, the upholding of our Constitution.
Yes.
I want jobs, and, you know, I want social change, but more than that, I don't want my rights stripped away as a U.S. citizen. So whoever brings that to the table is going to be very interesting to me.
Yes, yes, and I know we talked about some of the other candidates in the pre-dialogue about this show. We talked about Ron Paul, who is running under the Republican ticket, but, you know, has some very interesting values for a Republican, and there's actually some positive aspects, believe it or not, to his campaign and his platform issues that, you know.
Oh, I definitely believe it. Ron Paul has been a libertarian before. You know, he basically stands for the rights of the individual over the rights of the government. He has a lot of things that I don't agree with because I tend to be fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Yeah. So, you know, I'm a mixed bag, but so I think we have some responsibility to the other citizens, but I don't feel that the government has a right to do certain things or take away our basic liberties. So, you know, Ron Paul brings a lot of interest to the table. And running under the Republican ticket, I think he, you know, is basically being himself. He's not changing to cater to the extremists within the Republican Party. He's really standing for what he stands for. And I don't have to agree with everything you say. I just have to believe that you are an honest enough man to say what it is you do believe. Yes. So, you know, it's going to be interesting watching what happens with this primary.
Yes, and Mitt Romney's affiliation with the Mormon Church is a little scary because, of course, this is an organization that, by proxy or whatever, their rule was that, they saw black people as, unable to get into the kingdom of heaven because of their cultural or their ethnic identity. So that's pretty scary that he represents that. But I mean, of course, there's no blanket or we can't generalize any one religious group, say that they all feel a certain
Well,
way.
I think we can say that the Mormon Church was one of the largest contributors to defeating Proposition 8 to roll back the unions of homosexuals. So I think they have shown exactly what they think about individual liberty. And so just from that standpoint, I think he's a very scary guy. And if he is the one that is elected on the Republican side, I think they're making a major mistake because most Americans are not that extremist.
Yes.
Most of us tend to be pretty moderate.
Even Republicans, right?
Yeah.
Have some, liberal and...
It doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat, you do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, as is evidenced by President Obama's win.
Yes.
We will leave you.
Yes.
Okay? So,
yes. Yes. And I want to just kind of segue into our next topic, which is a very sensitive and intense topic for many people in this country, which is bullying in America and why they are doing it and what are some of the solutions. It has become a huge hot button issue. We continue to see a rise in suicides committed by young people as a result of bullying. And in some of the pre-dialogue for the show tonight, we were saying, I love what you were saying. You were saying that bullying's been around for forever. And I nor you, remember kids, at this degree or this level, taking their own lives as a result of being bullied. I know I was a victim of bullying as a child, and it's, it's a difficult thing. It's hard, but, I didn't think about checking out because of it. But I think that kids are under so much more pressure socially than we were, when we were growing up. I think that's a piece of it. But in terms of the root causes, one of the things I thought about is the role, and we're going to talk, this is like our next topic, but the role of religion in bullying, in the kind of, I see like religious extremism is kind of the step parent to bullying as a social problem. I think that, these religious organizations have put so much pressure on our youth to be a certain way, and that there's just no, they want them to fit in a specific box, and if you fall anywhere outside of the lines, don't color outside of the lines, you are condemned, you're going to go to hell. And these kids are feeling really hopeless because they are who they are. Whether they want to wear their hair purple, whether it's a boy who likes another boy or a girl who likes another girl, whatever it is about them that makes them unique and different, I feel like the religious institutions that are, leading the world don't recognize cultural diversity and aren't honoring, the principles and the values of cultural diversity, which again are basic American values when we look back at what this country was established on. And so, I think it's getting more and more serious as we see, the mainstream religions, putting more and more pressure on people to fit into the boxes. And I think some of the solutions is, education. I think, this piece, we have to explore this piece around gender identity. I think that's a huge part of the bullying, the gender identity, the freedom to, that you, just because you identify as female, you have to look a certain way or act a certain way or talk a certain way. And the same thing with if you're a male, you can't play with dolls, you can't like pink or whatever, all these so-called confines of manhood and womanness. I think that we have to explore that whole idea of gender expression and gender identity. I think it's a huge part of the bullying phenomenon in this country. So what are your thoughts, Hadia?
Well, I think bullying is a very interesting, it's a complex subject. As you said, bullying has been around forever. It was in our time, it was in our parents' time, it was in their parents' time. I think the difference is today, technology allows bullying to take a much wider scope, have a much deeper impact. whereas, we're socially communicating in the electronic space. And when you're doing that and people can attack you for the entire world to see, it's a much greater impact to these youth. And it's like you said, it's cultural in some areas, and Muslims are bullied, Latinos are bullied, gay people are bullied, fat people are bullied, skinny people are bullied, dark skin, light skin, it's all these types of triggers for bullying, and really, from my perspective, I was bullied. I was a bit of a nerd, so I was bullied, and I understand the impact that has on your life, and how you don't want to go to school, and you don't want to see them because you know it's coming, and all of that. But I think that when you look back at it, the people that bullied me, now that we're adults and we're communicating, I find that the ones that have grown say to me, I was just really jealous of how smart you were. So, instead of being jealous of each other, instead of being resentful of something that somebody else has, instead of trying to make yourself feel better by trying to find someone that you think is worse off than you,
or tearing down another
yeah,
human being.
we need to address the people that are bullying. I mean, the victims absolutely need support, okay? But we need to address the people that are bullying, and not stop the bullying, because that's true, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
What we need to address is, when it's identified that someone is a bully, perhaps we can address why they feel it is necessary to bully. Is it their own low self-esteem? Are they undergoing child abuse? Or are their parents drug addicted and in the street? Or are they trying to make themselves feel better by doing this? Do they feel less than because they don't have? We need to find the root of what's going on with each individual bully and work with that. And I think that will help reduce the bullying.
Yes. I definitely think, healing, affirmation, empowerment. I think those are key tools to addressing the bully themselves. And, because we know that this is an individual that in some way feels inadequate.
Right.
Because, no one goes after someone to the degree that some people are doing. And I agree with you that the social networks play a huge role in the intensity.
Yes.
The intensification of the bullying experience, where before it's just someone yelling at you on the playground.
Right.
Now they can go on Facebook.
Yeah, so you can't get away from it. In our time, we'd get on the bus, we'd go home, and then we wouldn't see them for a day. At least you had a break. But now the kids come home and they get on Facebook, or they get on MySpace, or they get on whatever the social network is that they happen to be on, Twitter, and they're being tweeted about. They're being bashed on Facebook. These are things that don't allow them to get a break. Therefore, it builds, I think, much more than the pressure built with us.
Yes. And I just say, if you are someone who is a victim of bullying, please reach out for help. Don't take a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Know that, we can do something about this, that, your teacher, your principal, your parents, your counselor, your pastor, someone can do something about this to stop, what's going on in your life. And if you are the bully, please get some help. You don't want to look back and know that you caused someone to feel so bad about themselves that they ended their life, that they took their own life as a result of something you said or did. And so please get some help and some healing for yourself as well. And finally, we're coming to our last topic. God, it just flew by. Again, if you're watching us via Justin TV, you can go in the chat room, you can comment, and also email us at yourworldtvnetwork1@aol.com. You can join our Ning site and be a member of the Your World TV community and hear lots of great updates about upcoming guests on the window at yourworldtv.ning.com. We would love to have you be a part of the Your World TV Enterprise family. So we have lots of great announcements for film festivals, submissions. We're looking for people to cast in upcoming shows. So please do check us out on the web and stay on the pulse of what's going on with this exciting new network?
Also, if you're an actor, musician, independent filmmaker, screenwriter, film festival producer, please go to Facebook to Your World TV and like us and join our family. We do a lot of postings on calls for entries, for film festivals, for people who are looking for actors or actresses. So watch the page and join in.
Your World TV on Facebook. You heard it. Do it. And so our last topic of the night is one that I am very passionate about, and unfortunately not in a good way. But I feel that of all the social issues in the world, to me, the thing that our government, that our law enforcement agencies, if there's one thing that they ought to focus on in the activists in the world, that is, to me, spearheading so much of the violence and the oppression in this country and in the world, it is religious extremism. I think you can find it as one of the culprits for the increase of bullying in this country, for the increase in domestic violence and child abuse, for the patriarchy that is also at the top shelf of the crimes against women and children. I think that religious extremism plays a huge role in it. And I think if you're a part of a religious community and you feel disempowered after you visit that spiritual community, or if you go to a church and when you leave that church you don't feel better than you did when you walked in those doors, if you go to a mosque and when you leave you feel hurt or abused, or you go to a temple, an African spiritual community, and you feel disempowered, know that you have a choice in being there. Well, hopefully we still have a choice. I don't know the way things are going with the legislation and changes in the U.S. Constitution. I don't know if religious freedom is going to continue to be, but that's another show, another topic. But I think that, again, one of my friends on Facebook, Tori, has a saying. She says, I don't have a problem with Jesus, it's his followers that I'm scared of. And it's funny, it's a joke, but there's some realness to it. And I think where I struggle is, some people say, oh, well, we should just, abandon, those mainstream, those oppressive faiths and re-embrace our indigenous faiths. I don't think, Christianity or Islam or any of the other mainstream faiths, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think that they're so interwoven in the fabric of, American culture. I don't think they're going anywhere. And I think that, we can't deny as well that there are good people in these institutions that are doing good work. I don't think, Orthodox Islam, has, the pieces of it that we see, that, the extremism that we see, that we've witnessed, that is, taking lives. I don't think that's what Islam was supposed to be, or Christianity. And I think that there are people who are Christian who are wonderful people, who are doing, great work in the world. We can't take that away. But I think as an institution, those religions, we also can't deny, the harm and the destruction that they're causing when they're, expressed and, perpetrated in an extreme way. So I want to talk about solutions before we close this topic out. But I first want to hear your opinions, Hadia Malaika, on religious extremism and how it's impacting us in the world socially and economically and spiritually.
Well, I think religious extremism has been a catalyst in the United States for the loss of some of our civil rights. The so-called jihad that has occurred has put the average U.S. citizen into a state that they're willing to vote for fear-based legislation, which does remove some of our rights. And, and then on the other hand, not just to pick on the Islam, we have people like Timothy McVeigh with extreme views that also cause the loss of our rights, because we no longer can walk to an airline gate to meet our family We now have to be searched by TSA. I'm not exactly sure
That's
about.
another show.
Yeah, yeah.
That should be a topic. That I need
Yeah.
therapy after TSA.
But you know, the intent is to keep us safe. I mean, how safe are we truly when extremism seems to be on the rise? And really, it's up to us as Americans to say no more of this. You know, one, we're not going to put up with extreme expressions. You have the right to have that extreme belief, but the extreme expression of your belief against our society will no longer be tolerated. And then, you know, there's a demographic change that's occurring in the United States and even throughout most of the world, depending on where you are, what that change is, that has been driven from a lot of the extremism that has occurred in some of the third world countries. And because of that demographic change, it has brought maybe a more, you can call it extreme or restrictive type religion into our society. So, you know, the United States is a place in the midst of change. We have to define what that change is going to be. We can no longer sit back and expect that we're going to vote and then it'll be okay or any
Those
of
days
that.
are over.
Well, yeah, it's over to the point that we're going to have to make a choice and say, this is how we're going to be. You know, and stand up to do it. I mean, it's not marches, it's not placards. You know, it's in the street, you know, this is how we're going to be. So we're not going to put up with the Sharia law. You heard about that was Ohio, I believe, tried to pass a law to ensure that was not put into law there, and it was struck down by the Supreme Court as targeting. Well, it was a target, and maybe it should have been written a different way so that it encompassed all religious law, but it wasn't. So, you know, we need to take a stand in these ways to make sure that we maintain the separation of state, government, and state. And so,
and for our viewers,
church and state, yes.
And for our viewers, for those of you who aren't familiar with what Sharia law is, it is one of the most extreme versions of, you know, Islamic, you know, legal jargon that involves, I mean, things that you probably can't even imagine, you know, growing up in America, you know, the things that, you know, girls, like things like girls can't be out, girls and women can't be out by themselves. You know, I mean, just many hardcore laws.
And that's
stoning. I think is part
stoning,
of it.
But even scarier than that, and that's scary, very scary.
Stoning,
but
if a woman is raped, they penalize the woman.
Yeah, but that's all very scary. But ultimately, the real problem is they are outside of the government, and they are a council of people who are religious leaders who determine what the laws will be
in the United States
in that group for that group. And so, you know, they don't recognize the authority of the government or the Constitution. So, you know, that's the scariest part to me. So, you know, and all of those other things follow on to that. So, you know, we must get this extremism in hand. And if people want to live in these type ways and have this type thing, they need to do it in the environment that fostered that.
Yes, and it's not just Islam. We want to be very, you know, clear. And again, I want to emphasize, because I know some wonderful sisters and brothers who are Muslim who do not adhere to, you know, that insanity and do not believe that that is a part of Islam. But I also want to recognize the oppression that takes place within the Christian framework. I mean, I remember once I was researching some of the rules at different churches around the country, across the country, and they have churches like they pick the movies that their parishioners get to see. They say, you know, parishioners aren't, they determine if a parishioner can listen to a particular song. They pick the music
Absolutely.
that their church members can hear.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah,
There are
it's
some
crazy.
Christian sects that don't allow their parishioners to get medical help. They have to
Yes.
just pray, and people
Yes.
have died
Yes.
because of this.
Yes.
So
Or take
extremism,
medicine.
or take medicine.
Yes.
So people have to put an end, or at least limit the amount of influence that these extremist religions have.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, religion is supposed to uplift us, uplift our soul
Yes, our spirit.
and our
Yes.
spirit.
Yes.
And if it is tearing down the fabric, then there's something wrong with it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there's a new film that just came out called Pariah. It's done by two, fabulous women, and it actually addresses the issue of religious extremism and homophobia. And there's a young girl in the film Pariah who is, getting in touch with her own sexual identity. And one of her parents is a very strict Christian, has a very strict Christian belief system, and literally attacks her violently, physically assaults her as a result of, her identity. And so I don't know how that is like Christian to beat up your child, to put your hands on a sock your child and beat your child down over something that you disagree with. I mean, I think that, we certainly have a right to try to bring our children up in a way that we think, shows respect and goodness. But I don't think that exemplifies respect or goodness.
I certainly don't believe that that's a Christ-like imitation. Okay?
No.
So, there's been a perversion
Yes.
of the ideals
Yes.
of a lot of these religions.
Yes, yes. And there's a very good book I always recommend, because often when I'm lecturing, and I did a whole series on Your World TV on the historical origin of Christianity. And so I talk about, the myths and the stereotypes, and it's some very hard, reading and talking. There's a book called The Historical Origin of Christianity by Walter Williams. And, you got to be ready. You got to put your seatbelt on before you read this book, because it is kind of tough to read. But I think that if we are going to believe in something, and when I talk to a lot of Christians, I say, well, do you know where Christianity came from? Do you know the name of the first Christian church? And they get this look in their eye like, no, I don't. So I'm going, well, how do you believe in something you don't even know how it came to be? Where its origin is from, how it, came to be, one of our main religions in the world. And so I think it's important to, dismantle and to scrutinize and evaluate any spiritual path that we follow, and understand its history. I mean, we won't even get into in this show its role in the enslavement of African people, the church's profiteering from the institution of slavery. So that's a whole other show.
Well,
and
the annihilation of entire peoples.
Yes, yes.
A lot of Indian peoples on the particular islands that the Crusaders landed upon were entirely wiped out in the name of the church.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of bloody history in a lot of different religions. But ultimately, in this day and time, we have to say that we will not accept extremism.
Yes.
And so, and that's the bottom line.
That's one of the things we totally agree on. Yeah. Well, we want to thank you for joining us. My name is Ifalade Tashia Asante, and I am host of The Window on Your World TV. And I'm just so elated to have with us tonight Hadia Malaika, who is the founder of Your World Television. And I'm so excited and honored to work with her and have her as a guest on this show, and look forward to more future episodes with us, talking to you about the subjects and the topics that you have emailed us and told us is important to you. And we want to hear more. If you have a topic, if you have an issue that you'd like to talk about and you'd like to see us talk about on The Window, please email us at yourworldtvnetwork1@aol.com. Visit us online on Facebook. You can also become a friend of ours on Twitter. And you can read all about the great things that we're doing on our Ning site, Ning, at Your World TV on Ning.com. So thank you for tuning in. Look forward to more great shows. And again, I'm signing off for tonight. Happy MLK Day.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Happy MLK Day. And thank you all for tuning in. Independent filmmakers, let us know what you're doing. We'll promote it. We're there for you. Your world, your way.
Your World TV. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.